Time for another special type of book, and this one will admittedly be completely uncharted territory, since it has no story at all to speak of. Today, I'm covering Secrets of the Clans, the first of 4, sort of 5, field guides in the Warrior series. You're not going to find summaries of these books very often, considering they're more collections of lore than they are pieces of a story. But as parts of the series' chronology, along with an important part of some people's understanding of the clans and world, I wouldn't feel right skipping over them. Secrets of the Clans came out on May 29th of 2007, only a little over a month after The Lost Warrior and the site came out. I'll also say, for no particular reason, that it came out only 3 months before a certain Super Edition, the first, in fact, meaning that the team absolutely knew about another group that maybe should have been included in this book when they were producing it. However, that element was kept entirely away from this field guide so as to avoid spoilers, and I will do the same. Wayne McLaughlin, who did many of the original Warriors covers as well, took care of the extra artwork this book needed for its various short stories, and it was written by Tui Sutherland, who you might also know as the sole author for the Wings of Fire series. A very good series, in fact, that I recommend you all check out. And honestly, some of the world-building, writing of history, and diversifying of the groups that I love in those dragon books is also present in Secrets of the Clans, and is a large part of the reason why I love not only this field guide, but the ideas of the clans that Tui created in it. Thanks to the nature of this book, there are no allegiances or line statistics to cover, so I'll jump right into a summary of the, not plot, material, let's say. We begin with the beginning, the very beginning, of the clans as a whole, and a preceding paragraph letting us know that this story was passed down to and through every clan cat, and even lets us know that the story changes every time it's told, and parts of it, entire cats, or even larger elements, fade from memory. The stories in this book aren't all perfect facts. They're the stories as the clans of the present world know and tell them, folklore. Just how much of it is actually true remains up to the imagination at this point. Keeping that in mind, though, this is what we're told. Once upon a time, the forest territories were wild lands, and then the clan cats came, living in small groups, not clans, with no borders and constant fighting. One night, during a full moon at a clearing that would come to be known as Four Trees, a truly terrible battle occurred, with everyone involved. The survivors slept where they stood and came face to face with the spirits of those that died, who demanded that they unite or die. 4 cats rose to speak. Shadow, River, Wind, and Thunder all extol their individual virtues in turn, and say that they should rule the forest. The 4 cats begin an argument, which is quickly shut down by the spirits, who berate them and say that the forest is large enough for all of them, that they must choose their own lands and set borders, along with finding other cats to join them. For doing this, they would each be granted 8 more lives to lead their clans with, and the spirits will always be there to guide them in Silverpelt above. They also demand that, each month, at the full moon, they need to gather in the same clearing for a night of truce. They will be warriors, living by a warrior code and fighting only when it's necessary for justice. The 4 cats agreed, formed their clans with cats who shared their skills, and the Age of the Clans began. We then get our very first list in the series for what the warrior code actually consists of. To this point, it has only been referenced in generalities, or by one particular rule, like cross-clan mates not being allowed, medicine cats not being allowed to have kits, or prey needing to go to your clan first before yourself or outsiders. Not all of even those rules are contained in the Warrior Code as we are given it here, but I won't list out those rules directly from the book since they are well known and easy to search for. At this point, we move into a rundown of information from each clan, one at a time, through notes and little vignettes where a character talks about a particular part of their life, or you see a scene of the clans in the third person. First comes Firestar and Thunderclan. They are apparently a respectful clan, but fearsome in battle and not afraid of challenge for what they think is right, regardless of whether or not it aligns with the code. They tend to hunt forest prey, mice, voles, birds, squirrels, and have the forest's best stalking techniques. I'll say before we go any further my one issue with the clan rundowns. Even from what little we've seen so far, a clan's character is based mostly in what the leader's values are, and what they decide to do. Nightstar's Shadowclan was different from Broken Stars or Tiger Stars, Leopardstar's Riverclan was different from Crooked Stars, and Firestar's Thunderclan has been different from Blue Stars. This book may describe clan reputations, but even those, as we will later see with Windclan, can oscillate wildly over time as behavior changes. Anyway, we also get a story from Brightheart's perspective about Swiftpaw's death, which, along with showing off Brightpaw's personality and values at the time, gives a much more vivid sense of horror than learning about it after the fact through Fireheart's perspective, and a much more personal look into Brightheart's feelings around her injury and recovery. Really, just go read this book, guys. It imbues everything with so much life. Sandstorm then shows you, the reader, around Thunderclan's forest camp, and soon after, Squirrelflight shows you around the lake camp, making sure you know that she was the one who found it. Both sections include beautiful and comedic character moments, which is amazing considering that this writing style only involves half of any dialogue taking place, from the narrator's side. With those tales aside, and a couple of annotated maps of each territory, we are then treated to a rundown of some famous leaders and medicine cats, with another reminder that these are just the cats the modern clans know of, and the versions of them that the modern cats are aware of. Thunderstar, of course, features here as ThunderClan's first leader. He was known to be strong, courageous, and determined, and had 2 deputies, Lightning-Tail and Owl-Eyes, who became Owlstar and succeeded him. Owlstar was a famed hunter who studied the ways of the owl to develop his technique. From there, we skip all the way to a Tom called Sunstar, a yellow tabby who was fair-minded and even-tempered, had 2 deputies, Tawny Spots and Bluefur, and 1 apprentice, Lionheart. Bluestar naturally gets in here too, and she apparently had 3 apprentices, Frostfur, Running Wind, and Fireheart. Firestar also makes it into the list, but as we spent an entire arc with him in focus, it doesn't give us much information we didn't already know. So it's on to the medicine cats. Here we learn about Cloudspots, the first ThunderClan medicine cat, who learned the difference between white and green cough and identified catmint as its cure. We also get to learn about Featherwhisker, Sunstar's brother and medicine cat, who trained Spotted Leaf. Spotted Leaf, Yellowfang, Cinderpelt, and Leafpool are also listed here, but there isn't much new information. So with all that done, it's time to move to the next clan. Tallstar introduces Windclan for us as a clan that has managed to persist despite great suffering, and the closest clan to Starclan thanks to their open skies and being closest to the Moonstone. Windclan is listed as being fiercely loyal, quick, easily offended, nervous, and a little quick to flee thanks to their open fields. They mainly make rabbits their prey and use camouflage with their neutral pelts and fast, tireless running in order to chase after their prey in the open. One Whisker leads our introduction to their forest camp, and then we get a scene about the raid on Windclan's camp by Brokenstar, a desperate situation that forced them to leave their territory before they were slaughtered. Crowfeather then introduces us to the lake camp he found. Add in some annotated maps, and we're on to the leaders and medicine cat section. Windstar and Gorestar were apparently the first 2 leaders of Windclan, and Windstar in fact never had another deputy than Gorestar, her mate. Windstar was known for being proud, wily, and stubborn, and of course the fastest cat in the forest, and Gorestar was known for his bravery and devotion to her. We also get a piece on Tallstar, where we learn he mentored Morning Flower, and one on Windstar, which doesn't offer much new information. On the medicine cat side, we have Mothlight, the first Windclan medicine cat and the one who found the Moonstone, Thrashpelt, a temperamental medicine cat who was a warrior for several moons before taking on the role, and Barkface, who we already know well. Time for Riverclan, as introduced to us by Leopardstar. She says that her clan is as strong, adaptable, and graceful as the river when they stand together. The info card goes on to say that they tend to be contented and well-fed thanks to the plentiful prey of the river, and that they have enough leisure time to do things like collect shiny rocks, shells, and feathers to decorate their dens. They eat mostly fish, with a few water voles, mice, and shrews on the side, and have seasoned techniques to swim through and catch things from the water. Feathertail shows us around the Riverclan forest camp, and then we get to hear, from Riverclan's perspective, about the flood in the first arc that took Mistyfoot's kits, and left them at the mercy of Greystripe and Fireheart's kindness. Mistyfoot then shows us around the lake camp she found, and we get a second clan story, this time a testimony from Leopardstar about how she decided to join with Tigerstar and make TigerClan. She is very defensive about it, and is probably a somewhat unreliable narrator, but she says that, given the amount of horrible dangers Riverclan faced and the short time before she became leader, she was compelled to take action, and she recognized and trusted the strength Tigerstar had, along with his vision for the future. Fighting each other and lacking in resources is pointless when they could just be one large clan. And, by joining Tigerstar first, Leopardstar was getting more access to the leadership of that new clan. Even then, though, she has her doubts. Tigerstar hasn't really started listening to her yet, and the way he talks about half-clan cats and Stonefur pricks at her as being wrong. But for now, all she's done is let a few Shadowclan warriors live in the camp with them, and the bone pile they're building is giving her nightmares. With that ominous note out of the way, Riverstar is the first leader we get, and he was apparently a generous and warm cat in his own clan, but completely disinterested in the other clans, and is thought to have first suggested the mentoring system for apprentices. Next comes Crookedstar, who we learn trained Greypool and Stonefur, and Leopardstar, who we learn trained Whiteclaw and Hawkfrost. Dabblepelt is known as the first Riverclan medicine cat, and she was apparently brave, reckless, quick to act, and considered fighting disease and injury as just a different way of being a warrior. We also learn about Brambleberry, Crookedstar's medicine cat, who was charming, quick-witted, and good at getting cats to do what she wanted. She also apparently came up with a technique for hiding herbs and prey so kits would eat them. Mudfur and Mothwing also get featured with little to no new information, so now it's time for Shadowclan. Blackstar introduces them as a feared and mysterious clan, and the most dangerous one in the forest, able to walk the shadows and ruthlessly protective of their own, along with being fierce, proud, and independent. The description considers them battle-hungry, ambitious, and greedy for territory, and cites a story likely from the other clans that the Chilledwind and Shadowclan cools their hearts to outsiders. They eat frogs, lizards, and snakes, along with carefully chosen bits from the garbage dump, or carrion place, at the back of their territory, and they hunt by sticking to the shadows and skulking through the undergrowth. Boulder, a former loner from the Two-Leg Place, introduces us to Shadowclan's forest camp, and Tawnypelt shows us the lake camp she found. It then skips straight into the leaders and medicine cats. First up is Shadowstar, the first Shadowclan leader who was a strategist and fiercely independent, not even fully trusting of her own clanmates. She was also the first of the original leaders to die. In a battle she started with the other clans. We next hear about Raggedstar, Brokenstar's father who mentored him and Clawface before him, and who had Foxheart, Cloudpelt, and Brokentail as deputies. Brokenstar is, of course, here too, but the only new thing we learn is that he had two apprentices, Mosspaw and Volpaw, both of whom died mysteriously before they could become warriors. Nightstar mentored Dawncloud, Blackstar mentored Tallpoppy, and there's nothing new to learn about Tigerstar. On to the medicine cats, where we learn that the first Shadowclan medicine cat was named Pebbleheart, a selfless and hard-working Tom who first realized that the carrion place was a source of infection. Yellowfang, Running Nose, and Little Cloud also get featured here, with nothing all that new to say. Now it's time for Yellowfang's story, a thankless kit, the story of her birth alone in the woods, nestled in a tree. Along with being physically painful, it was an emotionally tumultuous experience, as both of her she-cat kits died, one being stillborn and the other dying moments after birth, leaving the Tom as the only survivor. His face even this early is already twisted into a monstrous expression, and for a moment Yellowfang feared her own son, but she couldn't believe that he was evil so early. Yellowfang then gives up this kit to the only nursing queen at the moment, Lizardstripe, since she knows she can't raise him. And Lizardstripe already seems to hate the lump of fur plopped at her paws. Raggedstar, however, takes full ownership as the kit's father, and Lizardstripe seems to only accept the kit in the end since raising the leader's kit would give her status. Yellowfang then names him Broken Kit, seemingly for the bend in his tail, but in reality for the break in her heart as she left him there. It's a common misconception that she named the other two kits in this story too, but she didn't. Their names were only assigned after the fact in a letter outside of any canon book. Now it's time for the fifth clan. Starclan, of course, and Lionheart guides us through this part. He explains the main lore we are already familiar with. They watch from the stars without borders, but aren't capable of controlling outcomes, and Four Trees still exists there since it's in their hearts. Snowfur, Bluestar's sister, then tells us the story of Mosskit's death, Bluestar's third kit who didn't make it to Riverclan. Starclan apparently argued over the morality of Bluefur's actions, but Snowfur agreed to welcome and, in some sense, raise Mosskit once he died in the cold. After some full-sized maps of the territories, we get a description of Four Trees and a story from Bluepaw's perspective on the first time she saw it, 2 days after she became an apprentice and with her mentor Stonepelt and her mother Moonflower at her side. Seeing the great rock overlooking the clearing first convinced her that she wanted to stand there too and be leader of Thunderclan. Then, on Highstones and the Moonstone, we get the story of Mothflight, a flighty cat who was easily distracted by the voices in the wind or the berries on a hunting patrol. Eventually, it came to a head, and Windstar banished her from the clan, leaving Mothflight to follow a feather all the way to Highstones, where she had the first dream with Starclan at the Moonstone. Starclan named her the first medicine cat, asked Windstar to welcome her back, and showed her 3 other cats who also needed to be medicine cats for their clans. As for the Moonpool at the lake, we are given a different origin story from an ancient cat who we have never seen in the series before, named Rock. Apparently, seasons before the clans arrived, there were 3 tribes living around the lake, and they had healers instead of leaders. Rock was one of these healers, and traveled to the moon pool to see visions of his own. Dustpelt then speaks on the Gathering Island, retelling the story of their discovery of it at the lake territories, and Mudclaw's death giving them a bridge to reach it. And then we move to Tawnypelt's description of the Sundrown place and Brambleclaw's fall off the cliffs. Next, we are treated to a concrete description of various roles and the ceremonies for them, beginning with the Leader's 9 Lives ceremony. The cats who gave Firestar his 9 lives and the virtues they bestowed with them are listed here as well. Deputies are discussed next, then apprentices, and Birchpaw gives us a little commentary on his first day as an apprentice. Warriors are described, adding in a story from Brackenfur about the day he became a warrior, and then there is a short section on some clan fighting techniques, and then a description of the elders, along with a tale from Goldenflower about being an elder. For stories on breaking the code, Cloudtail tells us about being tempted by kitty pet life, and Crowfeather tells us about his forbidden loves, Feathertail and Leafpool. Then there is a brief description of prophecies and omens, followed by some notable examples. Bluestar talking about the fire alone will save our clan prophecy, Firestar talking about the 4 will become 2 prophecy, Brambleclaw on the shake the forest to its roots prophecy, and Leafpool on the blood will spill blood prophecy. This leads into discussion of medicine cats, and Leafpool's explanation of how she was always drawn to the medicine den and the skill and care Cinderpelt demonstrated. We also get a list of some important herbs the clans used, and what they're used for. Bloodclan gets a section about their character, leaders, and part in clan history, and Barley shares his story about living in and fleeing from BloodClan, after his brothers, once known as Hoot and Jumper, but now Snake and Ice, joined Scourge and turned on him, and his sister was hurt. He left Violet with a 2-leg doctor and a kitty pet he trusted and ran off to the barn on his own, where he could be safe. The tribe also gets a small section like BloodClan's, and Stoneteller speaks on the desperation and mistrust they felt when the Silver Cat was prophesied to save them, and the traveling group showed up. We get a description of rogues and loners, specifically Barley, Ravenpaw, Sasha, Purdy, Smokey, Daisy, and Floss, which leads into Daisy's story about Floss's kits being taken, and Daisy deciding to save her own kits by taking them, and herself, to the clans. Also notable is that Daisy knew Smokey wouldn't stop her, since he always loved Floss more. Kitty pets get a section, with Smudge, Princess, Cody, Jacques and Susan, and Millie getting focus, and then they describe other animals, mostly dangers like foxes, badgers, dogs, birds of prey, horses, sheep, and cows, rats, and 2-legs, all from the clan's points of view. Then, for a really interesting section, we're treated to some clan mythology, about Lion Clan, Tiger Clan, and Leopard Clan. The former 2 had been name-dropped, but not described in the main series before, and Leopard Clan is entirely new to this book. Leopard Clan's story tells of a brash Leopard Clan warrior named Fleetfoot, betting that she could easily defeat a massive boar named Rage that had been terrorizing them, if beating it would win Leopard Clan access to the river. She chased after it and drowned the boar, holding her own breath until it felt like it would burst, and then faced and defeated its even stronger mate after 2 days of fighting, winning Leopard Clan's sole access to the river. Lion Clan's story is about a warrior named Sunpelt facing down a giant snake named Mouthclaw to prove himself a great warrior. After defeating the beast, Mouthclaw promised Sunpelt 1 wish if he would spare her life. Sunpelt wished that Mouthclaw would shrink to the size of a cat's tail, and Mouthclaw took advantage of this wish, making herself into 1,000 smaller snakes that now haunt Snake Rocks. But Goldenstar, Sunpelt's leader, was still proud of him for trying, and considered the 1,000 smaller snakes to be easier to deal with than 1 snake that could swallow them whole. Tiger Clan's story tells of Thorntooth, a warrior who was bitter that Leopard Clan had their spots, Lion Clan had their manes, and Tiger Clan, at this point, had plain golden pelts. He started attacking the other clans, and eventually stole Goldenstar's only daughter, which promptly got Tiger Clan confined to the shadows for a whole moon. When they emerged, their pelts were all sliced through with familiar jet-black stripes. A glossary is then included to translate some common cat terms, and finally, this book is done. Believe it or not, even with this longer than normal video, I didn't even come close to giving all the information this book has to offer, let alone the tones or life breathed into the characters, plots, and world. This is a book I encourage everyone to read if you have any interest in warriors, as it adds so much to every read of the stories. Time will only tell, though, if the new ideas put forward in this book will be carried on or used in the main series, or if all of this will fade into the wind. But I suppose we'll see when we come to the next episode of our trip through time.